Hi everyone, welcome to my channel Unusual Code. In this video I'm going to discuss about various programming language I have worked with. Will share some important facts and interesting things while I discovered those programming language. In my 10 years of being a programmer, I had the opportunity to go through multiple programming languages. Each programming language has some strength and some weaknesses, and I'll discuss some points on those part as well. So let's begin with the first programming language. It was C. It was part of my college curriculum, and my journey with programming began with this language. So I started to learn how to write logic in computer programming code to C as part of my curriculum, and later I developed interest in programming and then explored C++, which is essentially the superset of C. C does not provide objects and C++ provide object-oriented programming. So naturally, I also explored C++. One book which was recommended by my college to start with C programming language was by Bala Swami. It was quite straightforward book. It has concepts and examples. But later I explored one book which really opened my eyes to the possibility the language of C++ provides, and that is C++ Primer Plus. I understood the scope of things that could be done through this language via this book. Although I use this language primarily to experiment with data structure and algorithms, and I use this program specifically for one very important project in my college. So as I have already created one video how my journey to programming was quite different, because I favored creating softwares or programs rather than going on the route of competitive programming. So in that sense, this language helped me to develop one program which was a game. I was able to use C++ to create various algorithms which enabled my game to play with real players. And I thoroughly enjoyed the process of learning by this route. It might appear that C++ does not fit well whenever we do client facing application, but two important projects later in my career proved it wrong for me. So the first project was in my first company. I had to create image processing program to convert an image into a cartoon. I used OpenCV for this process and use C++ as the language. As you might know that C and C++ are compiled language and run very close to your system. So it is the most efficient programming language and give the most juice out of your system. C++ helped me develop that program using OpenCV. So that is one use case which I used for professional work for myself. So there was another project where C++ helped me a lot. It was in the company Exigo. We had the data to serve the train users, and we had about 100 MBs of the train route data on our backend servers, and we wanted to provide offline on the mobile app as well. So there I created a way to encrypt that data, to reduce the size of the data to 1 MB on the mobile device, and query that data source using C++ program. So that was the native implementation of C++ in the Android app. There also C++ helped me a lot. So it is not that C++ is just an academic language, but rather I find very important use cases, as I mentioned, in my professional career as well. But having said that, it is true C++ is not well suited for many client application, and there we have specialized language frameworks. Let's talk about my second language, and that was Java. I started with Java programming in the process of converting my game, which has been written in C++, into Android application. I wanted a user interface for my game. So I began with Android development and it required Java. So I studied and learned Java, and here one book, Java the Complete Reference, helped me a lot. I have mentioned my journey for starting with Java in one video, and you can watch that. Few language features of Java which I really enjoyed. One was out of the box uh, arrangement of your project so that you can create a very large application through packages was very interesting for me. Second, how it provided abstractions and easy to use interfaces for data structures like hash map, like list. It is very simple. And third thing, and most important thing, it opened the door for me for multi-threaded programming. I didn't know a lot about creating programs where I put emphasis on threads or concurrency, and Java out of the box has support for this sort of programming. I learned about monitors, logs, and synchronization, which later helped me a lot. In Android, two use case is very common. One is creating a singleton. We have one resource, and multiple threads would want to first create it. So we want to synchronize it so that only the one thread is going to create it, and later other threads can access the created instance. And the second thing is using threads to synchronize over a shared resource. So let's say you want to have an access token implementation in Android application, and it can expire. So, and there are multiple threads making multiple network calls. So whenever it expires on all the threads, only one thread will be responsible for renewing it. Other threads will wait for the process to complete. Java also led me into the world of open source, and I started creating libraries, and it required me to get into the study of generics because the client application would want to customize its data types based on its use cases. So generic is a very powerful thing which I realized, and when I learned I was super excited to know what is the possibility there. So generic is a language feature of Java which I enjoyed using a lot. Later I also discovered and studied that similar thing I can do in C++ with template, but Java way is quite simplified compared to C++. One thing I would want to mention that C++ is quite a romantic subject because it gives you the freedom, it gives you the opportunity to think out of the box, create everything as you would want with the same efficiency, no abstraction if you don't want, but at the same time at the cost of uh, increasing your effort, and thus the use case also reduces. Java provide those abstraction for you and insist you to rely on the abstraction and use it, and it is quite effective. uh, Java also led me into the world of backend development. I started with Spring Boot application, which was based on Java, and quite easier for me to get on it because the Java as I have used in Android was similar to how I was using in Spring Boot. Of course, it had its own concept of uh, how to manage your database connections, how to manage the request and response, and all those things are there. But still, Java helped me from Android development to also exploring backend side. So quite a versatile language Java is, and I like Java because of out of the box support for many things required, especially for multi-threading. Uh, for the professional career, Java has been the one thing which has started my career and also provided me a good opportunity for growth. Let's talk about next language. It is JavaScript. JavaScript for me was highly undermined because I was going through the learning of programming and data structure and algorithms. C++ became the obvious choice because also the college had this curriculum. And when I started with Android development, Java was there. So JavaScript didn't had much use case initially. But as I started to explore my domain of work, um, Java naturally came into the picture. I started MindDocs, Android learning community, and I had to create the website. And the web app was based on React.js, which is based on JavaScript. So I started learning JavaScript. It was sort of a freeing experience because C++, and Java is a compiled language and strictly typed. And Java allows you to write anything anywhere, and you can write all the program in a single file, and you can run it, and it will run, and wherever it crashes, you know that yes, now here is the crash, but it will not stop you from executing the code. So you don't have to be perfect to start with it, and that is the beauty there. It allows you to fix errors on the go. It can be a superpower, but at the same time at the cost of various production bugs. But still, I find Java to be liberating for me. Language syntax wise is very similar to Java, so no challenges there for me. uh, Also helped me understand it's not just the power of thread that could make your program run very efficiently, but you can design your system in also a way that will increase the efficiency. With the introduction to event loop, my scope or sort of understanding of what can be achieved with a better programming improved. Java is essentially single-threaded program, but the event loop allows you to do multiple tasks, maximizing the capacity of a single thread. And also that single thread can delegate the task to multiple worker threads, or for the IO operation. So in a way, it is managing your various tasks that you want the program to do. So this is a very different way of thinking about creating a system of executing your program. So very different experience with the JavaScript. JavaScript is so versatile. I'm surprised. I started my React.js because I needed to create web app for my blogs and articles for the people to read, and also to have enrollment for the courses that I was offering. At the same time, I created a programming website where students can prepare for the interviews. There were questions, and you can code on the website. You will find the runtime errors and execution time also on the same website. So React was the thing which started my journey with JavaScript. But then I also started creating backend system for it, and this time I was using Node.js runtime environment and Express as the framework, a simple framework. And I was able to write my backend APIs with the JavaScript. I was also using the database which is based on JavaScript, MongoDB. And for monitoring also I was using a framework of JavaScript. So JavaScript, one language, was helping me to create both everything, front end, back end, data store, as well as monitoring tools. One language can enable you to create all these things. So that is a very powerful thing about JavaScript. First of all, it is simple. Second, it scope of work or domain in which you can apply is too vast. So now if I recommend anybody who wants to get into software development, I tell them that you can start with JavaScript. Okay, you don't have to start with any other language, but you can start with JavaScript. It would serve you well. But there was a challenge with the JavaScript for me because I had come with a strictly typed language, and I like type checking while I am compiling the program. Also, the IDEs that I use for writing the program works better if if I have type defined in my programs. And JavaScript was lacking on that part. And later I found that yes, this is solvable, but I have to use TypeScript, which is again a synthetic sugar for the JavaScript, provides all the language support for the types, and compiled back to the JavaScript. Now I found that okay, I like this language, and TypeScript also provide the support for types. So let's try it. And when I tried it, I really loved it. Now all my project of JavaScript is basically done using TypeScript. And the purpose of JavaScript for me is quite simple. If I have to start a project just now, I have to experiment with something, JavaScript is my go-to language. Uh, Next, let's talk about another language, Python. Python came much later in my experience. Uh, Two use cases prompted me to go for learning Python. One was to create some tools for scraping data so that I can show it on the application. Another was to do analytics on the data that we are capturing for my company, Curious Junior. At the same time, I am fascinated with the new way of writing, creating programs using AI. So there I wanted to explore the world of AI, and there Python has the most tools, and Python is the preferred language. So that was also one motivation. I really was very fascinated with Python because everything that I have learned about programming, the syntax that I was using is not applicable here. Rather, more English grammar based language or syntax was used in Python. So in a way, it was liberating. Now I am not I don't have to do the things in the same way, in a more constrained way. I can enjoy the freedom of using the more natural English based programming language. So that was one part. Of course, I would prefer strictly type and more structure in a more complex program, but for simpler tasks I don't want to get those complexity. So there Python was quite an effective tool for me. uh, Again, Python lacks types that I already said that JavaScript was lacking, so I had the TypeScript support. But in Python, there is support via annotation and other things, but I don't find it so appealing because I am not using currently Python for very large programs. So for me, it get the job done. Now, Python is quite interesting for me because I had to do analysis, get insights from the data, and I used pandas and other number based libraries and graphing and the tools to plot graphs. And it was quite simple. I just had to write 2 3 lines of code and my job was done. So if I had to get the job done the quickest, then I would go to Python. And also for creating certain command line tools, I go to Python. So this is the use case for me for Python right now. uh, of course, for the machine learning, I started using Python and library frameworks like Keras and TensorFlow, and that process is still ongoing because it is not my mainstream line work. So I learned for my curiosity. So these were the four main languages that I used professionally and enjoyed working with them. Let's talk about a few other languages, which is the consequence of working on these languages itself. First one in this category is Kotlin. So there was a great movement some time back where Android was transitioning from Java as the main language to the Kotlin, and naturally I I learned Kotlin. Uh, One language feature of the Kotlin, or two language feature of the Kotlin, I really enjoyed. First was type safety, which was famously quoted as it saves from $1 million null pointer error. And second is support for lambdas and high order functions. Apart from that, learning Kotlin had been quite simple because uh, JavaScript somehow has many features which Kotlin provide, and Kotlin is also quite straightforward. Also, I missed one very important feature of the Kotlin, that is coroutine. It is quite interesting because in Java I was working with multi-threads. I created multiple threads synchronized via locks, but here I don't have to do all these things. Coroutine simplified the process of synchronizing your resources and doing multiple tasks in parallel by using coroutines. And coroutine is quite efficient because it can utilize a single thread and can spawn many other threads as the demand grows. And the process of synchronization is quite simpler as well. So in a way, that was another introduction for me to think differently about synchronization. Second in the category is C sharp. The C sharp is the language I haven't worked a lot in my career, but it was the first language which made me start with the Android development. Because I failed Android development, I have mentioned in the previous video where I started my journey as an application developer. I was not able to set up Android because of the Eclipse and the framework at that point of time. And Windows has this complete framework for developing mobile app using C sharp. So I started C sharp, quite similar to Java, but my scope is limited to that project only. Uh, Other languages which I consider that they should be learned as and when required, HTML and CSS, of course, it's something that you will pick up when you are doing some of the projects through this language. So it will be naturally, and it does not have to be picked separately, I think. And one more is SQL, as you will be doing some data analysis or writing backend server using your MySQL type databases. So of course you learn SQL as well. So depending on your requirement, those languages can be learned to the depth as it serves your purpose. So these has been the language that I have worked on and experienced, and each language has taught me different things. Uh, One language which I have planned to learn is Go. Uh, it is quite interesting to find that this language has grown a lot in popularity because it is highly efficient. It has Go routine, and you can create a server which is compiled and highly efficient. So of course I would want to explore that language. Um, Now let's talk about my thought on the different languages and what I suggest based on my experience. So as you understood that each language taught me something different. So in a way, I would suggest that you'll have to go through many languages to have the same understanding. But having said that, the first language must be studied quite deeply, because all other languages that you will find would be very similar, very similar. It will have the same principles. So majorly the programming language differ in the out of the box support for certain features which is provided by the standard library or the third party libraries. For example, Python provide out of the box support for doing the number manipulation, and for C++ it would be difficult. It would not be that robust. So in a way you will prefer Python in that case. So each language has their standard library and third party support which will make you take this decision to learn this program. Otherwise, the languages are quite similar. The first language which you will pick to learn, you learn it deeply irrespective of what it can do for you, because the same concept would be used in other languages that you work later. In that sense, you can start with any language and master it, and other language will come to you very easily. uh, Second thing, you choose the language if you really have to choose, about the project, about the task you want to achieve, and see the offering by the standard libraries and third party libraries, and you begin with that. So some recommendation for specific use cases. So if you are in college and you have some programming course, you start with that program. That's quite simple, and most likely it will be C++. Somebody who has started to learn programming on their own, I would suggest go by Python, because it is quite natural, in the sense that your syntax are English like. It you will find it quite easier to start with. And if somebody has to start with software development, I will recommend go with JavaScript, because it is very versatile. The same language knowledge you can apply to create plethora of application. And later, when you want to specialize your domain, either you want to be a mobile developer, for example, you want to be an Android developer, start to learn Kotlin. If you want to become an iOS developer, start with Swift. And if you want to become a web developer, of course JavaScript is there. So later, after learning the first language, when you get interested in certain domain, those domain has specific language preference, you can start with those. So these were my experience with the different programming language, and each programming language is having a different flavor, and I love them all and use them as their use cases required. But at the same time, I'm not in awe of any one programming language. I use them case by case basis. So thank you for joining this video, and I hope this has provided some interesting insight. And if you liked the information, like the video, to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. It helps the channel grow and motivate me to find time and create more videos. Thank you.